This episode of Ink and Imagination is brought to you by Ramblings of a Comics Fan, available now on Amazon. Welcome back to Ink and Imagination, the podcast where we turn the pages of history and uncover the stories that shape the comics we love. I'm your host, Alex K. Cossa, and today we're stepping into the world of one of comics' greatest visionaries, Will Eisner. Eisner is a name most fans know for the spirit of pioneering the graphic novel with A Contract with God. But Eisner wasn't just a brilliant storyteller, he was a fighter. He fought for the recognition of comics as an art form. He fought for creators to be seen as authors, not assembly line workers. And he spent much of his career pushing back against a system that treated artists and writers as disposable. This episode delves into something I did touch on in Those Two Geeks 318, and it's about Eisner's fight for creator rights in comics, the battles he won, the ones he lost, and the legacy he left for future generations. Part 1. Setting the Stage. Comics as a Business. To understand Eisner's fight, we need to understand the battlefield. In the 1930s and 40s, when American comic books exploded into popularity, they weren't seen as art, they were product, disposable pulp. Something you rolled up in your back pocket, read, and tossed aside. Publishers, often businessmen with little interest in storytelling, treated comics like widgets on the factory line. Writers and artists were hired as freelancers, paid by the page, and that was it. No royalties, no rights to the characters they created. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the creators of Superman, sold their character for $130 and spent decades fighting, mostly unsuccessfully, to get recognition and compensation. Jack Kirby, the king of comics, co-creator of the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, the X-Men, and so many more, would wage his own legal battles decades later. This system was harsh, unforgiving, and deeply unfair. And into this system walked a young Will Eisner. Part 2. Eisner's Early Career. Will Eisner was born in Brooklyn in 1917 to a Jewish immigrant family. He grew up poor, hustling through the Depression, and like many of his generation, he saw comics as both an escape and an opportunity. By the late 1930s, Eisner had co-founded a studio with Jerry Iger, the Eisner and Iger Packager. In those early days, publishers didn't even have in-house creative teams. They bought material in bulk from packagers like Eisner and Iger, who churned out strips for various titles. Eisner was only in his 20s, but already he understood the economics of comics. He knew the creators were doing the heavy lifting while the publishers reaped the profits. And he didn't like it. But at this stage, Eisner played along. He produced what was asked of him: jungle adventures, superhero knockoffs, romance tales. But he was watching, learning. And then came the spirit. Part 3. The Spirit and Ownership Battles. In 1940, Eisner was approached with an unusual offer. Newspapers wanted a Sunday comic supplement, something that could rival the popularity of Superman, Batman, and the rest. Eisner created the Spirit, a masked detective who fought crime in a noir-inspired city. It was witty, stylish, and cinematic. But more importantly, Eisner struck a deal. Unlike Siegel and Schuster with Superman, Eisner retained ownership of the Spirit. This was nearly unheard of in 1940. Eisner was determined not to give away his creation. And though he had to compromise, newspapers technically licensed the strip, Eisner kept far more control than almost anyone else in the industry. But it wasn't easy. Publishers pushed back, contracts were written to strip creators of ownership, and Eisner's insistence on retaining rights often cost him opportunities. Still, the Spirit became a hit. Eisner's cinematic layouts, the bold lettering, and emotional storytelling elevated the strip far beyond pulp. It proved comics could be art, and it proved that creators could, under the right circumstances, fight for their rights. Part 4: War, Work for Hire, and Eisner's Awakening. Eisner's career was interrupted by World War II, where he was drafted into the United States Army. But even there, he found ways to use comics, creating instructional strips for soldiers. This experience broadened his view of what comics could do, not just entertain, but educate. When Eisner returned after the war, he found the industry shifting. Superheroes were in decline, crime, horror, and romance comics filled the racks. Publishers consolidated, and the system of work for hire, where creators gave up their rights entirely, was now entrenched. Eisner watched as friends and colleagues signed away their ideas. Some made quick money, but most ended up bitter, broke, and forgotten. And Eisner began to see his career as a test case. Could he carve out a path where a creator could retain dignity, authorship, and recognition? The fight was just beginning. Part 5: The Graphic Novel and Creative Legitimacy. Fast forward to the 1970s. Eisner had been in and out of the comics world, working in educational publishing, advertising, and more. But he never gave up on the medium. And in 1978, he returned with a bombshell: a contract with God. He called it a graphic novel. Now, we can debate whether Eisner truly coined the term, but there's no question he popularized it. By packaging a serious literary story in book form, Eisner was making a radical statement. Comics are literature, and their creators are authors. This wasn't just about artistic recognition, it was about legal and economic recognition too. Authors owned books, authors received royalties, authors had rights. By insisting that comics could be graphic novels, Eisner was forcing publishers, bookstores, and even courts to see comic creators as something more than hired hands. It was a bold move, and it opened doors for generations of creators who followed. Part 6: Eisner as Advocate. Eisner didn't just create, he lectured, he taught, he wrote about the craft of comics in books like Comics and Sequential Art and Graphic Storytelling and Visual Narrative. Everywhere he went, he argued that comics were an art form and that their creators deserved recognition and protection. In interviews, he sympathized openly with creators like Siegel and Schuster, who had been exploited. He acknowledged that his own insistence on ownership was unusual, even lucky, but he urged young creators to learn from history. Eisner became a mentor figure, a bridge between the golden age and the modern era, carrying forward the fight for rights and dignity. Part 7: What Changed, What Didn't? Eisner's Legacy. So, what did Eisner achieve? On one hand, he won important victories. He proved creators could own their work. He helped establish the graphic novel as a legitimate form. He inspired generations of cartoonists to see themselves not as workers for hire, but as authors. But the industry didn't transform overnight. Even today, battles over creator rights rage on. The estates of Jack Kirby and others have fought for recognition. Modern publishers still use contracts that strip creators of ownership, and young artists still face the same dilemma: take the paycheck now or fight for rights later. Eisner showed it was possible, but he also showed it was hard. Part 8: Reflection. Will Eisner's fight for creator rights wasn't always loud. He didn't storm courtrooms like Siegel and Schuster. He didn't publicly feud with publishers like Kirby. His fight was quieter, fought through contracts, through persistence, through the example of his career. But it was no less important, because at the heart of Eisner's work was a simple belief that creators matter, that the people who build these worlds and tell these stories should be respected, not exploited. And without that belief, comics would never have grown into the medium we know today. That's going to be it for today's episode of Ink and Imagination. Will Eisner gave us unforgettable stories, but just as importantly, he fought to make sure creators have a future. Next time, we'll continue our journey through comics history, uncovering the battles, the betrayals, and the breakthroughs that shaped the industry. Until then, keep creating, keep reading, and remember, every hero starts with a storyteller.
Hey, thanks for watching the previous video from Graphic Policy Television. Just by watching, you help support our site. Thank you so much. Now, if you're watching these videos, you probably care about geeky things like movies, television, comic books, toys, games, video games, you name it. You can go and subscribe right now to our YouTube channel to stay in touch and catch all the new videos, or check out our website at graphicpolicy.com. There's a nice link on this end of the video. But as always, thank you for watching. Keep on rocking and keep it geeky.